Welcome back to Movies Unboxed. Today, we're diving into Rebel Ridge, a gripping thriller where an ex-Marine uncovers a dark web of corruption in a small town. With explosive action, intense chases, and shocking betrayals, this movie will keep you on the edge of your seat. It all begins with Terry Richmond, a former Marine with a calm demeanor, biking through the city streets, music blasting through his headphones. He doesn't notice the police cruiser tailing him until it hits him, sending him crashing to the pavement. Officer Steve Lawn steps out, pins him to the ground, and calls for backup. Moments later, another police car arrives, and Steve tells his partner, Evan, that he's been following Terry for 2 miles. Terry, however, denies seeing the police, claiming he's just been riding along, minding his own business. Without a warrant, Evan digs into Terry's backpack, even as Steve discovers that Terry has no criminal record. Terry, revealing his Iraq War tattoos, calmly explains he's a former Marine. But Evan isn't convinced. He pulls out a bag stuffed with cash from Terry's backpack. Still unfazed, Terry explains the money's for bailing out his cousin, who's been locked up on a drug possession charge. The officers, not buying his story, confiscate the money, suspecting it's tied to criminal activity. They warn Terry that getting the money back will be a long, bureaucratic process. Terry remains calm, offering to go with them to City Hall to clear things up. They decline and drive off, leaving him stranded on the street. Shaken but determined, Terry heads to the courthouse, where he meets Elliot, a jaded court clerk. Terry explains the cops hit him with their car and took the bail money meant for his cousin. Elliot grimly informs him that once the police seize money, there's not much anyone can do. To make matters worse, Terry's cousin is about to be transferred to state prison, despite already being out on bail. Terry's desperate. His cousin, Mike, is a key witness in a homicide case, and sending him to state prison would put a target on his back. As Terry ponders his next move, Summer, a courthouse employee who overheard the conversation, steps in. She offers to help, explaining that asset forfeiture laws, meant to dismantle cartels, can be misused. She suspects corruption, hinting that the police chief might be pocketing the seized funds. Terry listens, though skeptical. Summer offers to help him with legal paperwork, and she agrees that Mike's $10,000 bail is unusually high for a simple possession charge. Terry calls up his business partner, Mr. Liu, asking for a $10,000 loan. Liu agrees to help, but the clock is ticking. Terry has until Wednesday to raise the money before Mike's transfer. That night, Terry camps out by a creek, contemplating his next steps. The following day, Terry marches into the police station, determined to file a formal complaint. He meets Officer Jessica and describes Evan, the cop who hit him, down to the last detail. Jessica steps away, conferring with Steve, who arrives moments later. Steve, cold and dismissive, warns Terry that filing a false complaint could land him in trouble. Just then, Chief Sandy emerges from his office, calm but firm. He tells Terry he was followed lawfully and treated respectfully during the stop, though his phone suggests otherwise. Sandy flips Terry's phone around, ordering him to stop recording the conversation. Terry, quick thinking, suggests a deal. Return just enough of the confiscated money to cover his cousin's bail, and the officers can keep the rest. After a brief pause, Sandy agrees. Relieved, Terry leaves, confident that his cousin's release is imminent. On Monday morning, Terry rides his bike to the station, expecting to see Mike. Instead, he watches in horror as a bus pulls away, transporting Mike to state prison. Chief Sandy coldly informs him that he arrived 3 minutes too late. Desperate, Terry takes off on his bike, weaving through the woods, chasing the bus. He calls Mike, urging him to request protective custody, warning him about the dangers he'll face in prison. But it's no use. Mike is gone. Terry turns to Mr. Liu once more, pleading for another $10,000. But Liu can't help this time. The police raided his business, seizing his safe and implicating him in the investigation. Liu, clearly shaken, explains he's barely able to cover his employees' payroll, let alone lend Terry more money. Terry, furious, realizes he's running out of options. He returns to the courthouse, where he finds Summer again. He reminds her of her promise to help, but Summer, now visibly distressed, says she can't risk her job. She tried looking into the case, but her access to critical information was blocked, deepening her suspicions of police corruption. She offers Terry some back-channel help with his cousin's bail paperwork, but admits that getting the money and a court order signed is unlikely, as the judge probably won't agree to any deal. Terry, feeling the weight of the world closing in on him, walks out of the courthouse, frustration boiling over. Determined not to give up, Terry heads back to the police station. His entrance sends ripples of concern through the officers. As they investigate, they discover Terry isn't just any ex-Marine. He's a jiu-jitsu instructor with combat experience. Chief Sandy steps out, trying to maintain control, but Terry's cold, calculating gaze unnerves him. Sandy admits the deal was a sham, and no matter what Terry does, Mike is stuck in prison. Just as tensions escalate, Officer Jessica uncovers Terry's military background, which terrifies Steve. Armed and on edge, Steve joins the chief, but Terry moves faster than either officer expects. In a flash, he disarms Sandy, using the chief as a shield. Steve tries to intervene, but Terry's swift and precise movements disable him effortlessly. The situation spirals into chaos as Terry takes control, using Sandy as a human shield to fend off further threats. Terry stands amidst chaos as a group of armed officers moves to surround him. Undeterred, he fights his way into the police station, locking the doors behind him. With the building now under his control, Terry orders everyone to stay put and directs Jessica, a fellow officer, to cuff her colleagues. He demands to know the location of his money. They point him to the evidence room. Among the confiscated weapons and cash, Terry finds a massive stash. He instructs Jessica to count out $10,000, the original deal he was promised, before ordering the officers to help him escape using a squad car. Knowing time is short and every law enforcement unit in the area will soon be after him, Terry makes a mad dash to the courthouse, his mission clear. Post his cousin's bail. As he reaches the clerk, Elliot, his connection speeds up the process, ensuring he quickly gets the judge's signature. But the situation escalates. An officer at the entrance receives a tip, and the building is suddenly swarming with cops. Steve, a determined officer leading the group, attempts to take Terry down with force. Taser shots fly, but Terry, fueled by desperation, fights through the pain. Some onlookers begin filming the chaos as Summer, true to her word, grabs the paperwork Terry needs. Just as Terry succumbs to the overwhelming situation, collapsing unconscious on the floor, he's not taken to jail but to an old hospital. Officer Evan escorts Terry to Chief Sandy's precinct, where he's offered an escape route, freedom in exchange for handing over the money and leaving the county for good. If he refuses, 30 years in prison await. As they ride in the car, Sandy presses Terry about what he saw at the station. Terry reveals the disturbing sight, a stash of cash large enough to fuel an entire criminal operation. The chief insists the money was seized legally, but Terry knows it's a lie. The ride is tense but subdued as they arrive at the hospital, where Terry learns a devastating truth. His cousin Michael has been attacked and is barely alive. Consumed by grief, Terry blames Evan for Michael's impending death. The stolen money, seized by the cops, was his only chance to save his cousin. In a moment of pure emotion, Terry mourns Michael's fate, standing vigil by his bedside. The police chief sees his grief and ups the stakes. If Terry takes the deal, he can walk free, but if not, he'll be hunted down. They've even recovered his truck, threatening to take it if he doesn't pick it up that night. As night falls, Terry collects his belongings from his hiding spot and meets Summer, who waits for him in her car. The pair drive in silence until she breaks it with news of her investigation. Bail amounts have been inflated in cases where the charges don't match, and the corruption seems far deeper than either of them imagined. But Terry, overwhelmed by his cousin's death, is indifferent. He's done fighting. He suggests they stop somewhere for food, signaling his growing exhaustion with the situation. But Summer, determined to expose the truth, presses on, revealing that Mike's imprisonment was part of a larger scheme. Terry, broken, replies that corruption in the state is no secret, but his sole goal was to save his cousin, a fight he's now lost. He just wants to disappear. That same night, Terry gives Summer his phone number before leaving her at her house. Later, Summer wakes up in a panic, realizing someone has broken in. Groggy and disoriented, she finds that officers from the precinct have injected something into her vein. Despite being weakened, she manages to reach her phone and call Terry, pleading for help. Without hesitation, the ex-Marine rushes to her house, breaking down the door and finding her semi-conscious in the bathroom. Pulling herself together, Summer confesses she can't go to the hospital. The drugs in her system would destroy her career and life, especially with her daughter's custody on the line. The next morning, Summer tries to act like everything's normal at work, but she's summoned by the judge, who reminds her of the strict conditions of her job. As suspicion grows, the court orders a test to determine her condition, and Summer's desperation reaches a fever pitch. Meanwhile, Terry, now on the run, is spotted by a county patrol. Steve pulls him over, taunting him about their previous deal, but Terry is resolute. He only came back to help a friend. Steve throws a gun into Terry's truck, attempting to frame him, and shoots him, though the bullet only grazes his back. They engage in a brutal fight, but Terry overpowers Steve, taking his truck keys and fleeing the scene. With every cop in the county on his tail, Terry hides his truck under a bridge and resurfaces, badly wounded. He calls Summer, who warns him that the cops are after her too, and suggests they leave town for good. Terry has other plans. He's determined to take down those responsible for his cousin's death and the corruption infecting the county. They meet at a Chinese restaurant, where Mr. Lee, a friend, patches up Terry's wounds. Alone, Terry and Summer discuss how far the conspiracy reaches. Sentences have been manipulated, bail amounts inflated, and the accused held for 90 days to drain them dry. Even the county judge is involved. Despite Summer's urge to run, Terry refuses. Chief Sandy won't stop hunting them as long as they have evidence. Fueled by guilt and anger, Terry vows to expose the corrupt network that took his cousin's life. Together, They visit Elliot to dig deeper into the case files. That night, Terry makes his move. He breaks into the judge's home, confronting him with a covered face, but the judge recognizes him immediately. Their conversation reveals a conspiracy far deeper than Terry imagined. The judge reveals that the sheriff's office was supposed to be transferred to the state police after a botched illegal search led to a suspect's death, bankrupting the county. What was hidden for a year under a false cleanup was now coming to light. Worse, Chief Sandy, whom many wanted removed, solidified his position by skimming $100,000 during his first month of seizures, money he shared with the judge and other officials. Terry, who once believed asset forfeiture was a legitimate legal process, finds his faith shattered as the judge clarifies the truth. The funds seized are funneled into covering county debts, payrolls, and public works. The system exploits those jailed for minor offenses, keeping them locked up for 90 days just to squeeze out bail money. The kicker? Patrol recordings get wiped after 90 days, making it nearly impossible for public defenders to gather evidence in time. As Terry processes this, he ties the judge's hands to prevent him from calling the cops, but the old man swallows his late wife's pills, attempting suicide. Minutes later, an ambulance arrives, with Terry and Summer watching from the shadows. They decide to take matters into their own hands and go after the patrol's recording discs, evidence that might clear Terry's name and expose the corruption. Sneaking into the basement of City Hall, they quickly realize they aren't alone. As they navigate the dark hallways, they spot a trail of gasoline that ignites suddenly. Summer jumps into action, holding the flames back for a brief moment, but they both know their time is running out. Finally, they find the location of the tapes, only to discover they've been destroyed. Thinking fast, Summer grabs SD cards from the previous week, hoping they contain valuable evidence. As they prepare to escape, Terry sets the fire ablaze again, forcing them to stay hidden from the patrols. In a tense moment, Summer suddenly stops, insisting she needs to find something before moving on. She and Terry agree to meet in an alley, but as Terry moves forward, flames lick at his feet, forcing him to ditch his shoes to avoid getting burned. Summer finds what she's looking for but is captured by the cops in the process. Terry, witnessing her arrest from a distance, immediately gives chase. Sprinting after the truck she's locked in, he watches as the vehicle stops, and some officers hop into another car. Left behind is a lone patrol car, and Terry crashes into it, forcing the officer out and interrogating him for answers. The cop, clueless about Summer's whereabouts, is forced to call someone who knows. On the other end of the line, Steve, one of the corrupt officials, offers Terry a deal, the SD cards in exchange for Summer's freedom. They agree to meet at Rebel Ridge at dawn. But as Terry prepares for the swap, he realizes the place is crawling with cops. He contacts Chief Sandy at the police station, but before the officer can track him, Terry hangs up and makes a bold move. He uses his truck to ram through a warehouse wall at the station, causing an uproar. The alert sends all patrols rushing back from Rebel Ridge, leaving Terry alone with the chief. Inside the station, Terry confronts him, clarifying that he didn't actually shoot to wound. His goal isn't violence but justice. Turning to Jessica, an officer Terry had trusted, he reveals he knows she's been Summer's informant all along. Terry hands her the SD cards, telling her they hold enough evidence to bring down several officers and expose the corruption. Just as patrols arrive, Terry warns the chief that unless Summer is safe, he'll burn everything down, including the stacks of cash he's soaked in gasoline. But before he can act, Jessica turns on him, forcing him at gunpoint to surrender. She alerts the officers to the chief's location and hands the SD cards to Steve, who quickly destroys them. Steve then assures Terry that Summer is free to go, but reveals she's in critical condition from an overdose on magic dust, a dangerous drug. Steve, about to finish Summer off, is interrupted by Evan, a fellow officer, who steps in, gun drawn, trying to de-escalate the situation. But in a swift move, Chief Sandy overpowers Evan, making Terry realize Evan, not Jessica, had been Summer's real informant all along. In the ensuing chaos, Evan is shot in the leg, likely hitting his femoral artery. Sandy, ruthless, refuses to call a medic, justifying his actions to the remaining officers. Terry seizes the moment, grabbing a bag and dragging the bleeding Evan to safety behind a patrol car. As Evan bleeds out, he instructs Terry on how to activate the patrol car's dashcam, hoping it recorded the chief's dirty dealings. With the last 3 minutes of footage captured, Terry sees a chance to bring down the corruption. He manages to slow Evan's bleeding while engaging in hand-to-hand combat with several officers. In a tense showdown, Terry defeats Steve and activates the patrol car siren, signaling for backup and buying time to save Summer. With Evan's help, Terry revives Summer, who groggily regains consciousness. As they attempt to escape, Steve clings to the window of their car, threatening Summer. In a surprising turn, Summer manages to push him off, sending him tumbling hard onto the pavement. Despite a blown tire, Terry, Summer, and Evan find themselves surrounded by patrol cars in a final standoff. In a shocking twist, Jessica deliberately crashes into Chief Sandy's car, clearing the path for Terry. With the chief out of the way, The remaining officers decide to escort Terry, Summer, and Evan to the hospital. At the medical center, Summer and Evan receive immediate care, while Terry, exhausted but determined, retrieves the footage from the dashcam. With the incriminating evidence in his hands, Terry knows that his long and harrowing quest for justice might finally be within reach. The corruption that has plagued the county is on the brink of collapse, if he can survive long enough to expose it. What a wild ride. Rebel Ridge packs a punch with non-stop action and a fight for justice. If you enjoyed this recap, hit like and subscribe for more movie breakdowns, only on Movies Unboxed.